Good evening, punters, and welcome to another episode of The Tripod, where we break down every NRL game every week from a betting perspective. This week we will be going through round 7 of the NRL, and I think a bit more pressure on us this week than normal. I'm sure we'll have a few more listeners after what's arguably one of our best rounds that we have had so far, and definitely the best round of this year, going 13-2 on best bets, casting all 5 of our Ladbrokes Same Game Multis. So look, pressure's on, but we will look to continue our good form heading into round 7. Jacob, how are you seeing the ball this round?
Well, we are seeing it well for sure. We are 38-13 on best bets for the last 3 rounds. No doubt about it, we're in form. But the downside with being in great form and getting the results going your way as a punter is the areas that you were finding value in start to diminish. The teams that we liked going against, like coming out of the break, the Cowboys, the Broncos, the Sharks, you made money betting against these teams, but now everyone knows they're not much chop. Or teams like the Rabbitohs, Panthers, Knights that we've really believed in and bet on, well, now those teams come at a premium. So the challenge as a punter is to keep working like a footy team. Don't get complacent when you're on a winning streak, because you need to keep finding an edge. One other thing I want to say, thank you to everyone who's tuning in tonight. We have an opportunity for this to be our most ever viewed pod. People are really appreciating it and appreciating the results. So you can still help us out right now. If you're watching this live, please interact, tag any mates who'd be interested, hit the react buttons when you agree or you disagree, share your thoughts in the comments as well. We really want you guys to interact, and that means a great deal to us.
Indeed. Let's jump straight into it, Jacob. Let's start with the Thursday night game. It is the Panthers up against the Rabbitohs. The Panthers are 2.5-point favourites, with the total sitting at 36.5 points. Now, this game at Jubilee Stadium has been moved from Campbelltown because there were concerns about the pitch from last week, but I don't think that makes it too much of a difference for either of these two teams. Look, I really like the Rabbits here, and I know I said last week that this Panthers side, after last week's performance, showed that they were contenders, but listen to me, they're coming off 2 pretty brutal games here. Firstly, a loss to the Eels in which they were up 10-zip, and that was played at such a frenetic pace. And then last week, the win over the Storm. Once again, a super fast-paced, brutal game. And there is a strong trend that after playing a Storm team, teams don't do too well against the spread the week after. And I think, not only the mental and physical stress of playing, those 2 epic back-to-back games, it is tough to just get up game after game after game. Now, in terms of the Rabbits, I think they're coming in a tad underrated here. I know that, they got killed, or not killed, but they lost their first 2 after the restart. Very, very tough draw to restart. But they've had pretty much 2 training runs since against the Titans and the Warriors. They're still a little bit underrated in my opinion, and they're getting healthier every single week. Latrell's getting better every week. Now you've got Cody Walker back. I think these are 2 pretty even teams. The Rabbits in a better spot, and you're catching points. I like the Rabbits. You there, Jacob?
And on top of that, James Roberts has been named.
Yep, you're good. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think the connection's a bit weak. I'm not sure if it's all sweet at your end, but you talk about the Rabbitohs getting better every week. James Roberts will play. And I agree with everything you've said. I think that the Panthers are a better team than the Rabbitohs. On pace, should have the edge in the forwards, but this will be as big a test as the last 2 weeks. As you said, last 2 weeks they played Eels and Storm, just because the Rabbitohs come in a lot fresher. They're a real side, and I think that will allow their forward packs to at least match the Panthers in this one. And then I see the class and the game breakers in the Rabbitohs' spine and outside backs. I think they'll win this one.
I agree. We're taking 4 best bets for now. These are our early plays. If we have any more, we will release them in the Tripod app, either on Friday or on Saturday. We're taking the Rabbitohs plus 2.5 points for the game. That's $1.82. You'll find that on Sportsbet in the other markets section. We're going to take the Rabbitohs plus 0.5 point in the first half. The best price for that is $1.89, also on Sportsbet. We're going to take the Rabbitohs plus 1.5 points in the second half. That is $1.90 on Unibet. And we're going to take the Rabbitohs plus half a try. That's $1.80 on Bet365. Let's move on to the Friday early game. We have the Storm laying 14.5 points against the Warriors. The total is 3.5 points. Another game that's been relocated to Jubilee Stadium from Amy Park. And this Storm team, I'm not quite sure. I mean, obviously they get a bit of a boost this week. They get back Addo Carr, they get back Jerome Hughes, but a bit of, indecision in the Storm team, not knowing what they have to do. I mean, they're saying that they may have to relocate to New South Wales indefinitely, so certainly a little bit of a distraction. But this is still a Storm team that is clinical, coming off a pretty disappointing loss where they gave away a lot of penalties, made a lot of errors. But this is still a very, very good team, and certainly a top 3 team for me. It is a bit of a tough spot for this Storm team if I'm playing devil's advocate. They obviously have the tough game last week, and now it's a bit of a, playing against a shitty team like the Warriors, and then you have the look ahead to the Roosters next week. So those are reasons not to like the Storm, but there's more not to like the Warriors. I mean, you get back Mamalo, but what sort of fitness is he going to be in? Fusatu named, but I mean, he did fail his HIA last week. But the main story here is that Kearney gets fired, and it's really hard to gauge the player motivation for this one. And I think, we mentioned it on last week's pod that generally when a coach gets fired, the team gets a little bit of a bump in motivation that following week. I think it's the opposite case here. Everything that you hear about Kearney and how the players felt about the firing, they thought he was hard done by. And I just find it very tough to see the Warriors getting up for this game as a double-digit underdog against the Storm.
That's right, because they don't really believe they have a chance. And why do teams play well the week their coach gets sacked? Sometimes it's because the coach had lost the locker room, so the players actually get an energy boost because they want to stick it to the guy who got booted out. That's not the case here. The players loved Kearney. Why else do teams play well when they get a new coach? Because they want to impress the new guy. They want to stake their claim and hold their spot. But Peyton, we know, is just a stopgap. I have a little theory. I can't understand why you would punt Kearney unless they have an Aussie coach in mind, and the Aussie coach wants to have a trial run while the team is in Australia because it's a big commitment for him. And I'll just throw a name out there, like Jeff Tuvey, before he would relocate his family to New Zealand, potentially to coach them in the future. I can't understand
it does seem strange.
Why else. Exactly. Right. And I don't think it's going to benefit them at all. And in a shortened season with the Storm off a loss, they will not muck around. I know they're playing the Roosters next week, but that's still, is it 7 or 8 days after this game? They are going to say, we need to be, primed for that Roosters game, and we need to improve our footy. They've been patchy at best. And you get back Addo-Carr, you get back Hughes. Also worth mentioning, Wade Egan is out suspended, and Eli Katoa, who's probably been the best forward on the Warriors team, is injured as well. So I just don't see the Warriors having much chance. We don't often lay a big line, but we have spoken about with the new rules with more sin bins. The Warriors suffered that last week. And, the 6 again rule, it's easier to run up a big score. I think that's exactly what the Storm will do.
And we've got 2 best bets on the Storm for now. We are taking the Storm 13 plus. That's $1.85 on BetEasy. And we are going to take the Storm to win both halves. You'll find that at $1.87 on Bet365. And congratulations if you're watching this on NRL Zero Fucks Given, because those bets will not be there in about half an hour's time. Next up, it is the Roosters up against the Dragons. The Roosters are 17.5-point favourites. The total sitting at 41.5 points. Now, Teddy named in this one despite being absolutely monstered by Sivo last week. But look, it would not surprise me in a game like this if they rested a player or two, and Teddy would come to mind in terms of this Roosters side. You have a brutal game last week that they got up for against the Eels, and in my opinion, the 14-point win did not show how close that game was. I think the Roosters were not 14 points better than the Eels. That was brutal, that one. So now you have what's called a sandwich spot. You play a really tough game last week against the Eels. Then you have a really shit team this week in the Dragons. And then you have a look ahead next week to the Storm. So it's not a good spot to be taking the Roosters here, in my opinion, with the big line. In terms of the Dragons, I know that they're not an elite team. I know they're a lot worse than the Roosters. But this is not so much a play on the Dragons as it is against the Roosters, even though Dragons, 2 wins in a row now. And to be fair, I think they've finally found the right roster construction moving forward. So I won't take too much out of those early Dragons games where they just had these weird, lineups that weren't ideal. So now Dufty at fullback, I think they've got it pretty much sorted now. So I like the Dragons here to cover the big spread in a spot where I think that the Roosters, not necessarily a huge letdown, but don't think that they'll be as up for this game as they were against the Eels. Yeah,
you had to twist my arm to take the Dragons in this one because I don't like betting against the Roosters. We've talked about how good they are, and everyone knows the superstars. But Mitch Orbison is not in the 17. Satili Supanua is not the 17. Those two are in probably starting on just about any other NRL roster if you don't realise how good this team is. Lindsay Collins comes onto the interchange bench. Lindsay Collins will probably play for Queensland later this year if he stays injury-free. So the guys you don't even know that well on the Roosters team are emerging stars. So they're so loaded. The Dragons lose James Graham. I don't think that's a huge loss because he really had no legs. While they've beaten two very struggling teams, what I said on Sunday was they found the right mix. Hunt at 9 is the right mix. You mentioned Dufty's playing well at fullback, suits the new rules. McInnes just wreaks havoc in the middle and gets through a mountain of work. It's the right balance. I don't think they'll win this game, but again, you're getting a key number, so we're going to take the Dragons with a lot of points.
And just the one, Mechanical Dragons plus 18.5 points, it ends up being $1.80. Now, you're going to put your main stake on Ladbrokes and Neds with the $2 lines on plus 17.5, and then you're going to put a 10% stake on the Roosters to win by exactly 18 on Bet Easy.
And I also think good chance Teddy gets rested because you got to save his legs. It's a straight 14 weeks now till finals. There's no need to play him even if he's got slight headaches or you know what I mean. So, and obviously if he gets scratched, the line will drop 2 points.
And honestly, if you're going to rest him for one game, it's this game. He got nearly knocked out. Well, he got knocked out last week. And now you have a pretty much unlosable game, what they would think is an unlosable game, and then a huge game next week against a side that's gunning for, a top 2 seed. So, anyway, let's move on to the Cowboys up against the Knights. Cowboys hosting the Knights up in Townsville. The line is plus 6.5 for the Cowboys. The total is 42.5 points. The Cowboys have been pretty fucking bad. Now, last week was really bad. They got absolutely embarrassed against the Tigers in the first half, gave up 34 points. So I think they will be improved from that, but still, this is not the Cowboys team that we're used to seeing. They're still missing Valentine Holmes. They're still missing Michael Morgan. Now you get, Jason Taumalolo is getting back to his best slowly after the injury. And I guess when I saw this line a couple of days ago, I think it was 8.5. And at that point, I did think that the Cowboys were value. There was a few points. I mean, first of all, 8.5 is a lot of points to get at home. But now for this week, they're allowing crowds back at Queensland stadiums. And, Townsville is one of those stadiums that
has... Up to 10,000 people, yeah.
Up to 10,000, there you go. So, and Townsville is one of those stadiums that has a pretty strong home field advantage. So you're going to get that crowd noise back, pretty much some proper crowd noise back for the first time in a while. And that's a pretty decent advantage to the Cowboys. But once again, this Knights team is very good. No Bradman Best, and he actually has been quite a standout for this Knights team. But even so, I think at the 6.5 line, it's probably fair. The Knights are legit. They think this is a team of destiny this year, and they are playing that way. Ponga's playing great. Pearce is turning back the clock. So I don't really want to play against this Knights team. If I could get 8.5, I'd probably take Cows, but at 6.5, it's fair.
You make Pearce out to be so old. He played for New South Wales last year in Game 3, and he was man of the match 5 straight weeks last year, and he's probably the same age as us, and we are over the hill. Mitchell Pearce is still one of the best 7s in the comp. I don't know why you keep making him sound like he's retired. But a friendly reminder in this game, Kalen Ponga used to play for the Cowboys. They could have kept him, but they couldn't find a spot in their 17. Now he's a generational superstar, plays for the Knights. Now, there are a lot of reasons to actually like the Cowboys in this one with the start. McLean is a chance to be back in the team. You mentioned Best is out. The effects of travel, the fact that you have to fly, and Townsville's pretty far away from most of the places they've got to go to play. They're sitting on a flight for 3 hours the same day that they have to play. That has definitely hurt them the last couple of weeks. Now it's the reverse. It's the Knights that have to do that going up to Townsville. So that is meaningful. That's one of the reasons why you have a home ground advantage. On top of that, you never want to bet against a team off a very embarrassing loss. And that's what I know that they redeemed themselves to an extent, but the game was far from over in the second half when they got all those backdoor points. They were absolutely disgraceful in the first half. They'll want to improve, and their players have come out and said as much. So you could only really want to take the Cows. But in saying that, we've already got a best bet, and a week ago, we bet on the Knights -1 at $1.88. So if you watched the pod a week ago, we gave that as an early best bet. We don't give out early best bets often, but that was because we really liked the Knights to win last week, and we liked the Cowboys to lose last week. And now, line moved 7 points, and that's with Bradman Best getting scratched, which we could never have predicted last week. So that's the beauty of getting a nice line. You can just sit back, and even though the Cowboys might become value if the line is at 8, if the line's at 1, we have a great best bet on the Knights. Let's just ride it out.
And a lot of people will question that bet, but you can go onto our page. There's tons of bet slips of people that did get on at the 1, at the 1.5. And look, if you are worried and if you put a big bet on at the -1, you can always play back on the Cowboys plus 6.5 and hope for a middle there. Next up, we got the Broncos hosting the Titans. The Broncos are 8-point favourites and the total is sitting at 41.5 points. Really strange what's going on here at the Broncos. I think it's a strange decision to bench Isako. I think he hasn't been that poor for them this year. Now, there's an argument to be made to take the Broncos this week. They've just been absolutely woeful. They've probably been copping it all week. It's a Thursday turnaround, so they've got even longer to stew on their loss. And, since the restart, they've played 4 teams. They've lost 4 times, but you could argue that all 4 teams that they have played are top 6 teams. I think that's probably not even an argument, I guess.
That's fair.
Reasons to go against the Broncos here. Flegler and Carrigan both out, and they've been decent. And the Titans, look, they are shit. But shit teams get up for certain games. And I'll tell you, shit teams don't get up for every game. But a game at Suncorp against your in-state rival is a game that a wooden spooner will get up for. And I know that the Titans are talent devoid, but they've played at Suncorp last week. They're playing there again this week. And it's a game that I think they could get up for. And honestly, the way that this Broncos team has been playing and not full strength at the moment, 8 points is probably too much, even against a pretty crappy Titans outfit.
Yeah, to be honest, if you ask Siebes, I know that this is a desperation, kitchen sink game, dead set. If the Broncos were to lose this one, there'd be calls for Siebes' head, and he's still got
so there should be.
But he's still got 3 or 4 years at big money on his contract. So that's going to be an absolute can of worms that he just doesn't want to face. His team just simply has to get up and win this one. The players have copped a lot of criticism too. But I don't feel like they're going out just thinking that they're going to win big. There's no way that they can have that sort of confidence. They'll be happy just to scrape a win out here. And I think the Titans can smell blood in the water, that their big brother that always bullies them is vulnerable in this one. You mentioned Carrigan and Flegler are out. Fafita is still away. Staggs is still out of this team, so they're not full strength, although the starting forward pack for the Broncos in this one is probably one of the best they've probably had since lockdown. And I think that should get them home, but it's no guarantee. Isako is a strange one. Isako was the best fullback on the team last year, but they started Darius Boyd at 1. And then this year I thought he would be the fullback, but they were going to play Jack Bird. And now they've dropped Isako for an 18-year-old. And look, they want to keep the bloke, and he might be thinking of going to the Gold Coast. He might be the better long-term prospect. But I wonder if Siebes just keeps picking these youngsters so he has a built-in excuse when his team loses. He can say how young they are, but he's the one choosing to play all these players potentially before they're ready. So while I think the Broncos, will throw everything at the Titans, and often that's a good time to bet on a team, this line is too high. The Titans are not horrible. You saw them come back against the Tigers. I think that they can keep this one close. This is going to be a very interesting M1 derby.
And I'll ask you just before I get to the best bets, Jacob, do you think, and I think it probably is a mini, and we're talking about 1%ers here, but I mean all the rumours floating around about David Fafita, I think has to be a little bit of a distraction in the locker room for this Broncos team as well. Look, we've got 3 best bets on the Titans for now. We are taking the plus 8.5 points for the game. That one's $1.84. You'll find that once again in Sportsbet in the other markets section. We're going to take the Titans plus 4.5 points in the first half. That's $1.86 on Sportsbet. And staying on Sportsbet, we are going to take either team 1 to 12. That is $1.80.
So how about this? Winner gets Fafita. That's fair, I reckon.
That's fair. Yeah, sure. All right, let's move on to the Eels up against the Raiders. The Eels are laying 3.5 points. The total, a very low 34.5, but it is understandable. Both of these teams have had fairly legit defenses. The game at Bankwest, so pretty much a home game for the Eels, but it's going to be bloody cold. This is the night game. It's going to be under 10 degrees for this one. I think that gives Canberra a little bit of an advantage in terms of, an away game being a little bit cold. You look at this game before the Raiders played Manly. This game was pick'em. Raiders lose to an understrength Manly, and this line goes out to 3.5, which is kind of expected. But kind of expected from us is to take the ugly duckling. We've mentioned a number of times this year that we think that the Raiders are a bit overrated here, but I think this is a great spot to take them off. An embarrassing loss to an understrength Manly. Now, in terms of the Eels, they miss Kane Evans again, plus Nathan Brown, who I think was one of their best last week, nearly had 200 run meters and, honestly looked like he was going to break the line every single time he touched the ball. Now, I think it's a bad spot here for the Eels. They've had not one, not two, but 3 pretty epic games in a row, played at unbelievable tempo. Last week against the Roosters was especially physical. I guess one advantage to the Eels is that they've played 3 of those last 4 games at Bankwest, including this one. Now, for the Raiders, I mentioned, it's kind of tough for them because they do have to travel every single week until they change the rules, I think, in round 8 or 9.
It's not far away now, and they'll be able to play at home again.
So they've been copping a lot of shit since the restart. But, I mean, they're 2-2. They were very disappointing last week. But let me just say this, and I said this, that errors and penalties are a little bit random, especially errors. 7 penalties to 2 last week, 15 errors to 8. I do expect improvement out of the Raiders, and I will take the underdog in this one.
Yeah, we really rate the Eels highly this year and thought that the Raiders would struggle, especially early in the season. I actually think the Eels of 2020 have the vibe of the Raiders of 2019. It's a squad with a lot of belief that is building. But you're right, they've played in 3 straight wars the last 3 weeks. So it's a bit like talking about how we're going against Penrith tomorrow night, that it's hard for a young team to get up to that intensity every single week. It just is. And the Raiders will be kicking themselves for not beating Manly, considering who was out and that Manly lost 3 backs, including their best player. But the Raiders weren't actually that bad. Manly was heroic. Manly played like an all-time performance to hold them out, and the Raiders had chances that were very close. So they weren't bad. They obviously know they're going to need to be better. When you have 2 teams that play each other that both believe they're top 4 sides, the top 4 aspirations, what you get in a shortened season is a finals intensity game. That's what I'm expecting in this one, which is why the total's low and why points are even more valuable. And you're right, I think it could be a letdown spot for the Eels after a very emotional game that they came up short. Even though I think the Eels will have a better season than the Raiders, I really like the Raiders in this spot, especially with Brown out and the Raiders unchanged. I think they can win this one outright, and we're getting a few points.
And I think this game is kind of typifies what we're all about, Jay, because, I mean, last week we kind of said, this Raiders side, we want to bet against them, don't love them in this one, and this week we're taking them. So we will take any team if the line is right, and the line is right here. We're going to make ourselves a mechanical Raiders plus 4.5 points. It ends up being $1.80 with our main stake on the Raiders plus 3.5 with the $2 lines on Ladbrokes and Neds, and our 10% stake on the Eels to win by exactly 4. That's on Bet365, best price. And our second bet is going to be the Raiders winning at halftime or full time. You'll find that one at $1.80 on BetEasy. Moving on to the Sunday games, we've got the Seagulls up against the Sharkies. The Seagulls are 3.5 point favourites. The total is 41.5. This one being played on the Central Coast, so pretty much a neutral game for both teams. Manly, what a gutsy effort last week against the Raiders. I mentioned this in the recap pod. Now, in terms of betting theory, you do have the injured player theory for Manly. Generally, when you lose a superstar player due to injury or whatever it may be, you get a bump in motivation and intensity from the team the week after. I do expect that from Manly this week. But what I also know is that although the line has shifted because Tommy Turbo's out and obviously Dylan Walker also out and you're still missing Sully, but just on the Turbo news, the line's obviously shifted. But in my opinion, Turbo means so much to this team and can create so much that we saw last week against the Raiders that even I think that maybe the line move is probably not as much as it should be given how important and how good he is to this team. And it is, once again, cluster injuries to that spine of Manly. Now, for the Sharks, this is a must-win. And last week against the Dogs was a must-win as well. And to be honest, they probably got a little bit lucky to win that one. So maybe a bit of lucky win theory. But they're 2-4. This is a kitchen sink game to them, and they've got to say to themselves, we can fucking beat an understrength Manly team here, and they have to beat a Manly team here if they do want to make the 8. Moylan didn't get involved too much last week, but from his, from the few touches that he did have, I thought he did look dangerous when he did have the ball. To be honest, I would lean Sharkies here. The problem is you could get 5.5 yesterday. You can't get 5.5 now. I think that the Sharks can probably match the forwards. The outside backs are similar and the halves are similar. So, look, lean to the Sharks, but I'd probably want to get over 4.5 or 4.5.
So we just talked about how great Manly were last week. And you're right, you cannot understate how good Trbojevic is. Tom Trbojevic. Absolutely unbelievable player. If you want to argue with me that Tedesco is a better player than him, I think it's close, but that's a fair argument. But Turbo is more valuable to his team than Teddy is to the Roosters. When Teddy's out for the Roosters, like when they played the Broncos or potentially this week, the team relishes in the opportunity and everyone goes up a gear, whereas you just can't replace Turbo. I looked at the stats. It's something crazy, like he's had a hand in 2/3 of their tries this season, whether he scored it or laid on the pass. Like, you can't replace that. Their forward pack gets improved because Tapau's back. Like, those middle forwards of Fanua, Blake, Tapau, and Gerbo, it's probably as good as any three in the comp. They still can win this game. Like, I look at Turbo's out. Brendan Elliott did really well last year. I just said you can't replace Turbo, but He's actually a good replacement level fullback. Lockie Croker's done really well off the bench for Manly. I think he can do a job at 6. And Parker will have to wait and see with HIA. So Manly will still believe that they can win this game. They've got enough. Cherry Evans showed really exceptional game management. Whereas the Sharkies also know it's a very winnable game, but I just don't trust them as much. And while you're probably right, you take them with the points if you get enough points. At 3.5, it doesn't feel like a generous amount of points to take the Sharks, so I'm happy to stay away for now.
Yep, the first game with no best bets for this week. The last game on the agenda is the Bulldogs up against the Tigers. The Bulldogs are 5.5 point favourites. The total sitting at 39.5 points. Bulldogs have been actually decent, and I don't like the way the Bulldogs play, but they played well, and they came close to stealing a win last week against the Sharkies. But look, I won't take too much out of it. I know the Bulldogs probably look decent, but I mentioned this after the first few rounds that the Sharks defense is putrid, and it's been putrid all year long. So when the Bulldogs put on 3 tries against you, it's not necessarily, just the Bulldogs' awesome attack. It's also the fact that the Sharks' defense has been horrible.
And one was an intercept try too.
And one was an intercept try, yeah. In terms of personnel, you get Kerrod Holland replacing Crichton there, and that probably adds in terms of goal kicking, I guess. I'd say that Holland's probably a better goal kicker than Avarillo. Now, the Tigers not coming in full strength. Jennings out. Musgrove out, Twal out. And the Tigers' defense will provide a lot more than the Sharkies did last week for this Bulldogs side. So, especially after they, let in 20 second half points last week against the Cows, I think they'll make a point not to switch off in the second half, and they'll make a point probably not to, work on their defense for this game. So I expect a low scoring game in this one. But look, at 5.5, there's no real lean. I know the Tigers are the better team, but, I'd probably want the hook, over a converted try with the Bulldogs in order to take the Bulldogs, I think, in this one.
Yeah, the Tigers off a win last week, but letting themselves down the second half. I think Madge dials in. Look at their 6 matches this year so far. They have not put together an 80-minute performance. In every game, there's been a period where they let the other team pile on some points. So they'll be really searching for that. And all the talks about Harry Grant, but for me, when I look at these teams up and down, I don't see like a great amount of difference. And I look at a guy like Luke Brooks. He's 25 years old. He was a Dally M halfback of the year in 2018. He should be the difference in games like this. Like, at some point, you've got to step up and really, assert your authority. But the Dogs forward pack, especially the fact that they get back Tolman off his quarantine while the Tigers lose 12, can match it with the Tigers here.
The Dogs forwards were running way harder than the Sharks forwards in the last 20 minutes of that game.
Yeah, they're a side that makes you earn it, and that's why I'm with you. I could only take the points, but again, I want over 6. And this being a Sunday evening game, when not necessarily every market's available and markets can move, we will revisit this one in a couple of days to see if we have a best bet. For now, we don't.
Indeed, we don't. So no best bets on the Sunday games, and that is going to do it for the week, guys. That was your round 7 preview. Look, all of these best bets will be posted in the Tripod app tomorrow and along in our group. But if you want all our multis, make sure you've downloaded the Tripod app and you're in our Tripod Punters Tips Forum Facebook group. But that's it for us on a Wednesday night. Hopefully, as good a week as last week. It's going to be very tough to replicate, but we will catch you guys Sunday night after the Sunday games to break down what is hopefully another winning weekend in the NRL. We'll see you guys then.
Lego.